Welcome back. You're an often guest at this conference. Lovely to see you. Terrence.
Wonderful to see you, and good afternoon and evening to everyone there. And I think we all need to give some flame to you and your team. I don't know if people have any idea how much work goes in corralling 27 different speakers, and behind the scenes, folks. I can just tell you all of the preparation, all of the technical detail, all of the care and intentionality. This is a great gift that you give to our global community. So I just want to actually give you fire and thank you.
Thank you so much. You're so kind. This is a pleasure. So, Terrence, I'm going to be off the air. Please feel like home. Let me know when you need the slides and the video. I'm going to launch them from the shadow. So okay. It's all yours.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and launch the first slide. So this is kind of, as Artem said, we're starting in the metaphorical, and part of the preparation of this conference was careful thought and dialogue and listening with many of us storytellers and saying what could be a theme. And you've probably heard Artem set up this theme, but in this talk, I really wanted to dive into the application of that theme. But to do that, we actually have to start metaphorically. We want to look at actually what are optics, what are stories as lighthouse, how do stories work, and how do we create storied moments so that we actually can come into the now. So we're going to begin a little bit metaphorically. We're going to actually even look at a Tolstoy story, and then I'm going to give you a actual process that I use in organizations and tell you a bit of a case study with it and show you its application, and then we can talk in the Q&A a little bit about different ways in which we use stories to create optics around really important issues, whether they be organizational or even societal. So we can kind of scale that in whatever direction people wish to go. So in preparing, I did want to take a moment and enter into the whole world of lighthouses, and recognizing that much of our audience is from Russia. I wanted to see, well, what are the Russian lighthouses, and are there any interesting facts or little stories that we might know about them? So these were new to me, maybe not to you. I have beautiful lighthouses. I sit in California in the United States and have also lived in Boston. So I've lived on the two coasts of the United States, where we've got the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, and have certainly been allured by lighthouses. But here are some of your lighthouses. I love this first one right there in the middle. I know I'll butcher these names, but Aniva. And this was built actually by the Japanese, and it is in a very remote part of the waters, built in around 1939. And during its day, it was, could house 12 people. But it does look like it could belong into a horror movie. I also want to give credit. I got these lighthouses from a site called Russia, from Russia Beyond. From Russia Beyond was the website. The next two actually are two of the tallest lighthouses in the world. The fourth largest lighthouse in the world is actually in Russia, and that's the one on the right, the Lesnoy near St. Petersburg. It stands at 73 meters, and it has been always really important in guiding ships into the commercial harbor of St. Petersburg. Likewise, on the left side, this 70 meter, the Osinovetsky, I apologize, just celebrated its 114th birthday this year, and this lighthouse played a role in World War II. And then there's the wonderful Tobolken lighthouse off of the Gulf of Finland. And this was built in 1719. So just a couple of lighthouses, but I'd like you to enter into the imagination of what a lighthouse is, what it would have felt like. In fact, it's probably getting to be evening there. So even though we're in the spring, it's not dark yet, but imagine a darkened night. Imagine climbing up the stairs to this tower in a remote place, not knowing who and what might be coming, and the seas are beginning to rise, and you're there with a warm cup of brost, or we would say clam chowder here on the west or east coast of the United States. And think about what your job is in this lighthouse and all the ships that you may or may not see that may be dependent upon you. So as you do that, we're going to use another piece of imagination. I'm going to ask Artem to go ahead and play. I have a song for you, and I want you to look at the lyrics. You'll be looking at them either in English or in Russian, of course. And as you listen to this little minute clip of this song, I want you to think about what these words, what the picture these words are painting, and how they give us an idea of what it means to be a lighthouse keeper, what it means to be a storyteller, and how the lighthouse is a way of understanding the way in which stories function in the work that we do with them. So Artem, go ahead and give us some music.
Some are saved and some will fall. Show you where the danger lies, but he can't help it if you capsize, 'cause he will light your way, but that is all. Steer your own ship back to shore. Won't you light my lonely way back home? This sea is full of misery and woe. Oh, be tired, those that say they don't need no light to light their way. They think they're safe enough on their own, drowning murky depths below. We all need a lighthouse for our own. It gets so dark I can't see which way I'm going. Oh, lighthouse man, I'm all I see. Shining it, lighthouse light on me. Lighthouse man, I'm all I see. Shining it, lighthouse light on me.
Artem, if we can't get the video to play, we can just go to
Terrence,
I'll just go back to the
just-
slide
we
and go
just
through the
did-
lyrics.
We just did. Don't worry about it. It just played. Guys, give us some fire if you heard
I'm sorry,
it.
one more time. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, give us some fire if you heard the song and watch the video, please, guys. And I'll tune back the slides. I just did subtitles for the video. I guess you didn't see it for some reason.
Oh, subtitles? You have subtitles? That's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Everyone
fine. Go
heard.
ahead and
Yeah,
play.
and according to the fires, everyone saw and heard it, so it's all good. I'm off to the show.
Oh, everyone heard it.
Yeah. It's.
Oh,
it's-
everyone off. Oh, good. I did not hear it. That's fine. Let's go back to the slides.
That's why we share stories around campfire, because the teller knows what the people hear.
That's okay. Thank you, folks, for your patience and my ignorance of how everything was working behind the scenes. Let's go back to my slides and let's look at the lyrics. So a great, a fun song. I hope you enjoyed it. But the lyrics have a lot to teach us. They have a lot to kind of prime us as to what really is happening with storytelling. So we start with stories as lighthouses, and the first verses, lighthouse man can't help us at all. Well, what does that mean to say? This whole first 6 lines is all about the danger of being on the sea, that lighthouses can't somehow help us. Maybe they can show us where the danger is, but he can't help us if our ship crashes or if it capsizes into the water, but he'll try to light the way, but that's all. You've got to steer your own ship. So what does that tell us about stories as lighthouses? Well, it tells us that lighthouses are not going to necessarily save the day. If you think that you can tell a story or even a collection of stories that is going to manipulate or coerce or move people in a single direction, it's really more about the listeners. And it sounds like a lot of the sessions today, two of them in particular, Kat Kopit and David Drake, will give you some deep insights into the nature of that storytelling. Ultimately is about listening. And so it's the person in the ship who's receiving light that ultimately has to make sense. So if we think of the lighthouse as sense giving, and we think of those who are receiving the light that are on the water, that are trying to find their way through the complexity of a situation, then they are the sense makers, and they themselves have to steer their ships back to shore. Now, it can be really lonely, and the sea's full of misery and woe, and they don't need no light to light their way. So again, it's not your single casting of light. And in a second, we're going to look at the actual mechanisms of a lighthouse to understand how optics and light work to create both insight and sense making for people. So people might think that they're safe and don't even need the lighthouse. They don't even know where they need stories in order to better understand the complexity of a situation, whether it be a organizational situation or, as we said before, kind of like a societal. But the fact of the matter is we all need lighthouses. So shine a little light, lighthouse on me. So it really is that we're starting a process of trying to shine light. It's not that our story or even our story work gives the complete light. And in just a moment, when we look at the Tolstoy story, and before we actually look at the practical application, we're really going to get to this idea of it starts with a little light, and then it's really the work that's done by the individual or individuals, the group, in coming to insight that leads to action, leads to behavior, leads to an openness to other possibilities, other ways of looking at a situation. So we should define the word optics. I'll never forget my 5-6-year-old son. He's now 21, but when he was 5 or 6, him saying, "Daddy, I want to understand light." I'm like, oh my goodness, that's coming from a 5-6-year-old boy. So we ran down to the library and we tried to find books about light. And to this day, I probably couldn't really tell you anything all that scientifically valid or true about the nature of light. It is a mysterious thing, and yet how dependent we are on it. But optics in English has two different connotations. And in some ways, we can almost think of them as sense making and sense giving. In one sense, and as we look at kind of this top picture, we can think of optics as the study of how sight works. How do we focus in? How do we cast light in a certain area in order to gain a clarity around what we're looking at? Without the light, we can't make out anything. We're in the dark. Another analogy of this is the story of the blind man, and there being an elephant in the room, and each blind person is touching a part of the elephant and then trying to describe. Well, it's only through the collection of experiences, the different touches of the different body parts, that there's a possibility to determine really what it is that you're looking at. So all of our optics, like these ships of the lighthouse that the lighthouse are guiding, are all in the dark. So how is light behaving? How are we casting light to provide opportunities for sense giving? So we're giving some possibilities of what it is that we're touching, what it is that we're looking at. Now in English, I'm not sure how this maps to Russian or other languages, but we have a second meaning of optics, which is when I say I've got the optics of a situation, it means I do have clarity. I understand how something is being perceived by others. And really that bottom picture of light being cast through a prism, which then separates into light, is a way of metaphorically thinking about how the story, beginning as an initial light, has to shine through the experiences, the sense-making capacity of others in order for it to turn into a, in this case, light, be separated into a color. But there's a certain clarity, right? We have an understanding. As I shine the light through one area of the prism, it creates a orange light or a green light or a yellow light or a blue light. So optics is also not just the study of sight and the behavior of light, but it's also having some real strong understanding of how a particular event is being perceived by others. And perceived is kind of the operative word there. So for a few more minutes, we are all going to be ferologists. And I had great fun diving into some of the construction and the mechanics of lighthouses. And there's fascinating history of how even lighthouses evolved when they started to use certain type of fuels, and how different types of lenses were created for these things and how they were built and constructed. So fascinating. Thank you again, Artem, for choosing this as the conference metaphor, because it's very, very rich, and I had never really dove into it before. So let's look at the main portion of the lighthouse, which is the lens itself. Now, that first picture on the left is a lens, and there were lots of different types of lenses. There was a French physicist by the name of Fresnel. I think I've said that right. And he began designing different types of lenses. What's key about the lens as you look at it is it concentrates light. It's a convex lens, and what a convex lens does is it allows for whatever the light source is to be concentrated almost in like a beam-like fashion. So you see all those pictures of lighthouses, and you see the lighthouse having kind of like a beam as the lighthouse goes around. The light goes around in the lantern room, which is basically the clear room. We'll look at that in a second. And so the convex lens, as you look at it and see all these different facets, it's like cut like a diamond, and it has all these different places where the light can pass through. And as it passes through that portion of the convex lens, it gets concentrated. Think of also as the convex lens as the first set of people that are receiving the light of the story being shared. Whether it is you sharing the story or someone else in the group, you have people standing around as listeners who are themselves becoming concentrators of the light. And then what happens to the light? The light goes out onto the black, darkened night of the ocean to hopefully reach another ship. So here we have this idea that stories move beyond the moment even in which they're told. They start in the sense maker, those who are receiving the story, and then that light through others, whether it is spoken or not, goes out into the world, reaching others. So think of the lens as the first set of people who are receiving. Think of the lens as concentrating the light, and it is the beginning of the sense-making process. Now, in the middle is what's called the chariot. I love that term. So here you can see the wheels, and if you look at the picture to the right, the wheels are underneath this big lens, and there's a lamp inside where this lens is, and the chariot is turning this around and around and around. So it's important to recognize that we've got to move the stories. The light of the story has to go around and around, going through the convex lens in order for it to have a chance of being heard and turn into some kind of meaningful shift in people's attitudes, perceptions, ideas, behaviors, etc. So the lantern is a clear room. As you look at a lighthouse, there's the lamp in the middle of the room, but it has to be able to have 360 degrees. Well, what does that tell us about stories? Well, we need to recognize that stories are perceived, stories are received, and need to be received with 360 degrees of visibility. So we often, those, and I realize that probably many of you are not necessarily coming to stories for the first time. Some of you may be, but I would emphasize that if you consider stories as a traditional form of communication where clarity and precision is absolutely critical for the success of that communication, stories don't really necessarily have their true power in being precise or clear. Look at what we're doing right now. We're working through the complexity of how are stories received? How do they make meaning? How would we use them in organizational settings? And we're working through a metaphor as a way of trying to tackle some of these things that in many ways are elusive. So it's really important that there's visibility, and that the visibility is around the listeners in 360 degrees. So that's that room. So let's go to this beautiful story by Leo Tolstoy. So again, you being a Russian audience, largely a Russian audience, I wanted to use one of your great stories. And I think this will have a lot to show us about the now. So one of the other themes that Artem and his team have put together for this conference is, how do stories give us the now, and what's needed now? What is this whole now notion, and how does storytelling fit into that? So I think this story will give us an entree into what I'm going to talk about next, which is sense making and the practical application of it with a story process. So this story starts off, there's this wonderful emperor, and the emperor one day realizes that he needs answer to three very important questions. He wants to know, what is the best time to do each thing? Who are the most important people to work with? And what is the most important thing to do at all times? So he decides that he's going to hold a contest, and whoever can give him the best and most satisfactory answer to his three questions will win a wonderful prize. Now, he goes and asks, and some of the answers he gets are hardly satisfying. Some people say, hey, look, Mr. Emperor, what you've got to do is you've got to have the most detailed plan. Go into one of those web-based applications like Monday.com or any one of those other things and create the most detailed project plan. Know what you're going to do down to every single minute. And that's the only way that you'll know what is the best time to do each thing. You've got to plan it all out. Well, someone else said, forget that. That will never work. You just need to be totally present. You need to just respond to whatever happens at any given moment, and just hope for the best. You can't plan for it at all. Another person said, hey, let's put together the wise council. We'll even make sure that we have ChatGPT 4.0 who we can chat with. So in the wise council, and listen to the wise council. So none of these answers were satisfactory. And the second question was very similar. People said, who are the most important people to work with? Oh, you better go work with the scientists. No, you better go work with the priests or the the military people. And so he's like, that's not making any sense. And the third question was just more of the same. What are the most important things to do at all time? Well, no, only focus on your military. No, only focus on your religious stuff, and only focus on your administrative stuff. So he just threw up his hands and said, that's it. I need to go and find this hermit that lives in the mountains who's the wisest person. So he's going to head off, but he realizes, I better make myself appear not as the emperor. I better appear as a poor person. Otherwise, he probably won't receive me, because he really doesn't, usually receive people of wealth and power. So he goes off and he finds the man, and the old man is sitting there working in his garden. He's got a spade and he's working. And the emperor, disguised as a poor man, says, hey, I've got these 3 questions. Can you answer them? And the old man just pats him on the back and doesn't really answer the question. And the emperor, seeing that this man was old and there was a lot of work to be digging in the garden, and he looked very tired. So he said, well, can I give you a hand? And the hermit hands him a spade, and old man starts digging. After about an hour or so, he's dug a couple of rows. He looks up at the emperor. He looks up at the hermit and says, well, are you going to answer my questions? Here are my 3 questions. And the old man just says, hey, I can take over now and start digging. And the emperor says, oh, no, that's okay. You continue to rest. I'll keep working. So he works about another 2 hours or so. And now at this point, it's gotten dark. And the emperor throws down kind of his spade, a little frustrated. And he says, look, are you going to answer my question? I've been here for a while. If not, just let me know and I'll go. And at that moment, they hear someone running. They hear some noise. And he says, well, who's that over there? And a man runs into the garden, and he's bleeding, and he's like stumbling and falling over himself. And so the emperor quickly, opens up his shirt and realizes that the man's been stabbed. And so he quickly goes and takes his shirt off and puts it around the man's wound so that he can stop the bleeding, and does that several times. Actually takes the shirt and washes it in water and reapplies it to finally get the wound to stop, and gives the man kind of comes to, and he hands him a little bit of water to refresh him. And then the hermit and the emperor see that the man needs to rest, and so they work together to bring the man into the hermit's little hut and put him on the hermit's bed. Well, at this point, the emperor is really tired, doesn't want to go back, so he just falls asleep, there on the floor of the hermit's hut. And the next morning, the sun comes up, and the injured man wakes up and says to the emperor, please forgive me, emperor. He recognizes him as the emperor. He goes, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I am one of your arch enemies. You killed my son and took my property. And when I heard that you were on your way to see the hermit, I laid in ambush and thought this would be a perfect time to kill you. And so, here I am. But instead, you have saved my life, because when I came out of ambush, I said, I'll just go to the hermit and kill you there. But as I was on my way, your guards saw me and they stabbed me, but I was able to get away from there. And now you've saved me. Well, when the emperor heard this, he was so touched. He's like, wow. I am so sorry. I'm going to send my attendants to heal you. I'm going to give you back the property that I took from you. I'm going to make you someone in my court. So there was this incredible reconciliation between these two, an opportunity for forgiveness. Now, at this point, the emperor says to the hermit, so what are the answers to my question? And he says, well, you just got them, didn't you? The most important thing was helping me when I needed help. And you attended to me and my needs in the moment as those being the most important thing to be doing was to dig. Now, if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't been attentive to me and to my needs in that moment, you would have been killed in ambush by your arch enemy waiting for you. And yet, when he came in injured, if you had not attended to his wound, since he was the most important thing, and his wound was what was most in need of your attention, he would have died and you never would have been reconciled. So what a beautiful story, what a powerful story. Only Tolstoy could write a story like that. And it very much is about the nature of the now. And we're going to look at stories as being facilitators of epiphany or the now. I kind of love this picture. The hands is the ocean, or the hands rising from the ocean to lift up a little island, an island of meaning, of what is happening in the moment that's emerging, or has it always been there? That's one of the natures of the now, is that oftentimes things that have been in the wings, things that have been in the dark, come to a focus, come to a combination in the moment through the power of sense making that we do with stories. So I realize we're getting really close here on time. I want to leave enough time for questions, but I think we can get through this. So when you work with stories, you can think of like 4 possible ways in which sense making is occurring, especially if you are facilitating. And when we do story work, we're acting as people, we're holding space for stories. We're creating prompts, we're creating opportunities for people to hear stories, we're creating different ways in which a group is saying, what does this story mean in relation to all of us and to what's happening in our organization? So when we do that, there are some different ways that people respond and react, and there's some different things that you can do as a facilitator. The first is this idea of rationalization. Oftentimes when we hear a story, what we're doing is we are trying to match that story with an existing set of ideas or principles. And in this way, we have to be very careful because stories can be used as weapons. Now, the good news is that often when we're trying to support maybe something that is well understood, having a collection of stories speaks even more than data, as we know. But they can also be abused. I'll never forget a story I heard about a coastal commission here in California that was meeting. And they were trying to decide about a marine sanctuary. There was a little area that was a wharf, and on the wharf was a no fishing zone. But someone decided that they really wanted to disrupt where the boundaries of the marine sanctuary were drawn. So they actually fabricated a story. They took a picture of someone in a wheelchair fishing off of the pier. Well, that then became a rationalization, a story that was told when they showed the picture of rationalizing, see, we shouldn't be drawing the line of the marine sanctuary because we'll be taking away from the possibilities of those who are unable to maybe go out on a boat or get to other areas where people can fish. Now, it's not to say that that wasn't a legitimate argument, but the rationalization of using a story to rationalize the sense making they wanted to give to the situation was a possible abuse. Extraction is this idea that we pull out of a story specific meaning. You know, when you hear people say, I've got a moral to the story, or I have a single reason of why I'm telling the story, people will work with a story and often try to extract specific details or a specific interpretation from the story. And this obviously can limit really what that story does. Another thing that happens in that analytical process, even though it's one that people are familiar with, is they become limited by that particular extraction, by that particular assignment of meaning to the story. Now, another one is projection. Here is a passive way in which people receive stories. They say, I don't really have my own story. I don't have my own way to make sense of this. You tell me what this story means. And so you begin hearing other people's extractions or rationalizations, how they're projecting meaning into the story. Now, of course, this can be really useful because it allows you to hear how lots of different people are projecting meaning into a story. The challenge in this lies in that you may never, as a listener yourself, dig deep and find what this story might mean for you. The last way in which people work with stories, and this are just four ways of creating a simple organization of how people are working with stories. We could go into much more depth here, but insight-based is emergent. And this is where we get to this whole idea of now, and where the true power of stories lie in their imprecision, not in their precision. And where we get back to the lighthouse, like this picture in the middle, where light is being cast in all directions, through that convex lens, in that carriage room where the light is clear, where there's windows and the light is turning around and can be seen. And this is this idea that we help others find by actually using multiple stories in many cases, whether those stories are spoken or not, they're happening in people's minds, to find insights. And the insights emerge. They may not be there. It's that idea that when you look at a story, you hear it in a way that's fresh. So even when you reflect on your stories as an individual and as a group, and both things are always happening, especially in a group setting, right? I'm having an individual sense-making experience, and then I'm going to have a group sense-making experience. And then we can think of the ocean as yet there's even a third layer of sense-making that happens in an embodied way as the story leaves even just that moment in time where it's been shared and where sense-making has happened in a group, and people move out into the world through their behaviors and through what they share with others. So let's get to a application of this. One last kind of little metaphor: the light of stories shines through a prism. So when we first started, I had a picture of optics, remember? And in the optics, there was both kind of the circle, a way of concentrating your sight, and then we also had the light passing through a prism. So the light of stories, and notice it's plural, stories, shines through prisms, that being people, to create a stained glasses of meaning. And stained glasses are lots of pieces of specific colored glass, just like what light passes through in a prism, that together create a picture. So the insight is both collective and individual, but when it comes together collectively, a picture emerges, and it's that emerging picture that's most important to us. So I want to share with you a little group process activity, and then at least leave 2-3 minutes for some questions. So I stumbled upon this. This was early in my career, and I was leading a workshop, and I was told not to let people go early. It was someone else's workshop, and I had gotten through all the exercises, and it was the final exercise. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have 2 hours left on the clock. I went too fast through this material. What the heck am I going to do? And I said, oh, this final exercise, they're just supposed to get with another person and basically, say it was a communications workshop. How would I use any of what I learned in this workshop in a previous experience, and how would it have made that different if I applied it? So they were supposed to think about a time when they were ineffective as a communicator, and if they applied something that they now had learned in the workshop, what would have been different? And it was just supposed to be a quick little conversation between two people. I said, oh, here's what I'll do. I'll have people, first of all, work at a tables, and I'll have them share not just one experience, but 3 experiences. This idea of sharing 3 different experiences became the beginnings of what I call the magic 3. I'm going to share with you, I'm going to read to you a time where I used this. Now, this also comes from another communications workshop. This can be applied in different settings. It does not have to be a quote unquote learning experience. It could actually be a focus group. It could be a listening session. It could be a change management intervention. So you can ask some questions about how this could be used in different ways, but I'm going to share this example from a workshop. So in this workshop, in the communication, there was this guy, Len. And Len was a nuclear physicist. He was a technology project manager at a nuclear, in a nuclear facility. And he was an incredible communicator, just articulate. In some ways it was like, why the heck are you in this workshop? Because he really had a good executive presence and very articulate and whatnot. So I decided to give him 2 exercises to come in and prepare for the group. The first I knew he was going to be brilliant at. I said, I want you to take a complex newspaper article or journal article, and I want you to condense it into a 30-second executive summary. And we're gonna put the stopwatch on you. You've got 30 seconds to distill this entire article into a soundbite. Now, of course, he did that brilliantly because that's what he was good at. And now for the second exercise, which I knew was going to be a stretch for him, and I was purposely vague, and that's the nature of the instructions for this exercise. I said, I want you just to find 3 stories from your personal experience that somehow are connected to one another and are not necessarily one moment after the next. So it's not like one long story that has 3 direct connections. It's kind of like 3 different moments, 3 different events in your life that somehow have a connection. And of course, he looked at me like, are you really teaching this class? Like, that's about the most imprecise instructions I've ever gotten for anything. This is coming from a guy who's really precise, right? So I realize, Artem, I want to be very respectful of time, but I'm going to just read. This is a transcript, a condensed transcript. It'll probably take me about 2 minutes to read through, and then I should at least be able to end on time. And I'm happy to take questions offline and write answers for people. So here's what Len shared with the group. I've always been a fairly private person, so joining groups was never high on my list of things to do. About 7 years ago, I decided to get more involved with my local Catholic church group. I was surprised at how quickly I began forming a core group of friends who became a central part of my life. My weekends were filled with fishing trips, barbecues with our wives and families, and generally fraternizing with my new cohorts. It had been a long time since I had experienced this kind of camaraderie, and I was relishing every minute of it. As a group, we kept growing closer and closer. Even my family was caught off guard by the quality and depths of relationships I developed with a bunch of total strangers. Now, this continued for several years. After a horrible car accident, I found myself in the hospital recovering from a life-threatening back surgery and long days of excruciating pain, blunted by the constant dripping of numbing morphine. Everything was a haze. I was in a complete fog of pain, depression, and despair. During those horrific weeks, there were 2 pins of light that got me through these dark times: my family and my friends. Now, family, you kind of expect them to be there for you, but I was amazed at the dedication and energy my friends gave to me when I needed them the most. To this day, I believe my friends were a special gift granted to me to ensure I pulled through a very trying experience. A couple of years later, my buddies wanted to go on a weekend retreat with the church, but I resisted. But after a lot of cajoling, I agreed to go. We had a fantastic time, and the retreat was filled with lots of soulful opportunities to recharge our batteries and put the challenges of life into perspective. My friends made the retreat a special experience, and I returned home with fresh vigor and zest. The day after my return, my father died unexpectedly. I believe my friends and the retreat were granted to me as a form of preparation for my father's death. I was able to be a source of comfort and strength for my family. I had more emotional energy to give them. To this day, I'm eternally grateful for friendship and all of the richness it has given me in life. Now, just to put a bow on this, and then I'll stop to be respectful of the time, what he really realized in putting those 3 stories together that he had never done before was the insight emerged that in his organizational communication, he had to not just be precise, because while he was a clear communicator, he didn't really have the strong relationships. He realized that in telling the story, he had to occasionally bring a little bit more of himself, including some of his own vulnerability in an appropriate way to the organizational setting, in order to allow others to connect to him more effectively. With that, Artem, I'm going to stop because I realized we've reached our time limit.
Terrence, thank you so much for so many different ways to look at stories with lighthouses. What a terrific talk. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we really do have time for one traditional question. And guys, if you have questions for Terrence, and Terrence, if you have some time, you could stay and answer in the chat. Terrence, my question is also related to the lighthouses. A story is a lighthouse, and it can guide us out of the danger. But the more lighthouses we have, the safer our route becomes. So what story would you like to hear from more people, so the world becomes lighter?
Yeah, what a fabulous question. 2 things. Stories of wonder. So as we go through our day, can we observe those moments? We're living in really tough negative times, and this is not about being a Pollyanna and not being realistic about all of the things that we're dealing with, but it is an exercise in gratitude, in wonder. And the more that we can share with people our own observations of the little moments and of the little things, it will lift others up and help others to make different type of sense making. And the second thing is actually a way to access what truly is negative without dwelling on it in a way that takes us down a hole of despair, which is those moments of vulnerability, which is if I share the moments of my blessings, of wonder, of observation, then I can also share the moments of pain and difficulty in with some vulnerability, so that we're not all trying to appear as this, I've got it all together, I know what this all means, because we don't. We're living in a lot of complexity, and it's only lots of stories, it's only lots of lighthouses through lots of stories casting light that creates that stained glass picture that can bring more light in and give us a beautiful picture. So I'll stop with that answer.
Oh, love it. Thank you so much. Oh,
Absolutely.
and we have Susan joining us. Susan, I'm on to you in a second. For now, I just want to ask our audience to light up the fire once again for Terrence. This was a terrific talk. Terrific, I would say. Sorry for the pun. So, yeah, please feel free to stay and reply in the chat and listen to the other talks. As always, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you, Artem, for all you do.